と25時間と10分よ。
Yeah, doing this to Burai as opposed to making him part of the core team, in hindsight I feel was a mistake.
As it pretty much caused what past series were trying to avoid by including 6th Rangers in the first place. The thought of a single Sentai team member being more special and important than the other leads.
Though from what we've seen of certain more recent series, that no longer appears to be a concern at all.
Because now, as he has to stay in the lapseless room to preserve the time he has left, he would only show up when the team was unable to deal with things on their own, thus showing them as less capable than if he was just there fighting alongside all of them, and detracted from the core idea that their strength and unity was what was needed to defeat their enemies.
Then again, the early side of the show had already done a bad job of that through having them saved from their own incompetence by either Deus Ex Machina or to glorify the child guest actor of the week. At least this time they're being saved by someone that's stronger than all of them, despite all supposedly being great legendary warriors.
Thus, he became more special with how limited his use was, instead of becoming inundated to his presence as a latecomer and used to fuel story potential with the character dynamics. Because, as said, Burai's presence was a gimmick instigated by Shirakura to get attention back on his show.
Except it would prove itself to not be a great execution of the Sixth Ranger concept, even though for years afterwards Sixth Rangers would ape elements of Burai. Because he wasn't meant to serve the story, he was, again, superfluous to it. They could have killed him right after his introductory arc and given Geki the Zutsoken and dragon armor like they do later, and little would have changed since for much of his appearances, he shows up just to save the Zyuranger and do nothing else.
Thus, he lacked meaningful time with the others to drive their own developments or expansion of their character, which, as said, in this show is non-existent. The best we get is some short reconciliation scenes periodically with Geki, but even those feel as if they were more focused around Burai than anything which benefited the team's red. It's, to me, just another citation of the show lacking in any form of ongoing advancement for the group as people, and how such seemed to not really matter. But because Burai came at this time, following shows were now allowed to have them officially, and later spun off the additional concept of the Extra Ranger, who more matched Burai's initial role in that they weren't regular members of the team, but would come to assist when needed. Ko and Riki following this would have better story arcs for their appearances, the crippling of O-Ranger notwithstanding. Yusaku, as I showed, was written to have legitimate reasons for his limited appearances, and his impact in the show was shown elsewhere as well. Hyuga would play a central role in the development and story of Ryoma on top of his own, despite being counted as an extra ranger and likewise having limited appearances. And both Naoto and Shirogane in their own ways would redo the elements of Burai's story in a more fleshed out manner. Naoto the anti-heroic foil for the Time Ranger who over time became their ally, and Shirogane the noble warrior twisted into a servant of evil due to events in ancient times, to say nothing of their execution over in Power Rangers that have been more hits than misses.
So a lot of good things and good characters did result from the creation of Burai and going back to his arc for story ideas. But Zyuranger in and of itself, I feel, did not, or were not allowed to, take advantage of them fully.
To be honest, I strongly feel that the best potential time to have first started doing it would have been Dan the Birdman and Jetman, as from his short appearance he showed enough potential to have accented the team dynamic well, especially with Akko, and had a history with Vyram that would have added to the conflict, and I said as much in my review of Jetman. That, I feel, would have showcased a better roadmap that later Six Rangers from Deca Ranger onwards would more match up with than trying to ape an element of Burai that wasn't given the focus it should have. But hey, that's just me. But if they really wanted to do the Burai is dying death plot, I would have waited until later in the show and have it come out of nowhere. Let him be properly part of the team for a time. Then as he's nearing a similar point in the story to where they actually have him expire, well, have him start to weaken before revealing all this stuff about his revival only being temporary, and nothing can stop a death once it's happened. Likewise, then alluding to their use of Kai later that his proper return was only a fantasy great Satan facilitated to keep things consistent, and thus not showcase a potential problem of contradiction between the two sides. That could have also led to a differing end to the conflict, with Bandora abandoning her plans so she can be happy with her son in the time he has left back with her after they beat Great Satan, and make the death matter more as we've been given the time to properly connect to the character through the length of their entire journey.
泣いているのかい翔太郎バカ言うなさよなら
キリコが愛する者たちを守れるなら本望だ。
Either way, because they gave Burai this whole 6-episode introduction, and would make the following story arc with him and his coming death the only ongoing story to Zyuranger, he became the show's absolute most popular character. Mainly as he was the only one presented as having character. And many would cite him and him alone as having saved the series from itself.
Anyways, episode 23 has Dora Pixie hit people with love balls, which makes them fall in love with whatever they first see.
I miss Crisis right now.
Dan and Boy are affected and spend the episode accosting May, a brat taking one of the balls to force a girl he's crushing on to love him in turn, which is all of the, and I mean all of the nope. Barza's Xenotome, a book he frequently uses for out-of-nowhere exposition on things, reveals this pixie was once a Cupid, even though it was created by Pleprecon. But it leads to the first case of Burai saving their asses from something that really should have been something easy for them to beat. Episode 24 has Todpack and Bookback make their own Dora monster, with blackjack and hookers, and by sticking a traffic light on top of a tortoise. What? Yeah, this monster was always weird, but it's an oddly effective one. Its green light making those afflicted run until death. Boy's affected by this, and thus is the one to go after a plant that can weaken the core mythological creature this turtle is based off of, anyways, while everyone else but Geki ends up being hit by the red light. And the red light, of course, means... The plant thing that weakens it annoys me, though, as the only explanation they give to why it does that is the plant is something that lives longer than the tortoise. But being older is not a clear means to providing a counteragent. Episode 25 features Goshi in similar setup circumstances that kicked off Boy's involvement in the last episode. A inexplicable friendship with a couple kids, overseeing them commemorating a statue sculpted by their recently deceased father, that is now being used for evil. Butterflies roost on it and thus gain the ability to spread a neurotoxin to those they touch, which thus puts them to sleep.
Ah! A plan fit for the monarch!
Deploy my super mutant henchmen army!
Though I don't get why butterflies were chosen for this, as the Dora monster impersonating the statue proves to be a tarantula, so spiders would have made more sense. Maybe because butterflies are more appealing as an insect? I don't know. Even though the zoos once again do badly against it, it goes giant without explanation, which then leads to its defeat in turn with the intervention of Burai. 26 reveals Totbat being experienced as an alchemist. K. And he crafts a potion which can swap a person's mental state, which he then uses on the Zyuranger while they play tennis.
You are from 170 million years in the past. How have you learned tennis?
But yeah, this affects May and Dan, turning them into punks. Punk is nothing but death, and crime, and the rage of a Zyuranger.
You do realize that dressing like a punk doesn't actually connect as someone being evil, right? And where the hell do you get these alternate outfits? You don't have money!
Of course, Totpat stupidly tips off the others to them being under a spell, because the other Zyuranger were too stupid to figure it out themselves, even as May and Dan go around straight up murdering people!
Them doing that is never spoken of again, by the way.
Barza eventually figures out a counteragent, derived from Mandragora roots, while the other Zyuranger are all eaten by a toad monster. Even once Mei and Dan are back into their right mental states, they do no better against the monster. At least until Mei makes herself resourceful and manages to pin the monster's hidden face, its one weakness, with a spear trap that releases the others.
I keep saying that Mei's the most competent of the core 5, and yet no one believes me.
Episode 27 features Mei encountering a child florist who happens to have grown plants she knew from her home time and cultivated by her home tribe, though are put in danger by the monster Dora Guzzler, who can ingest flowers to convert them into carnivorous biting plants, which can inject the poison into those they bite.
This unfortunately is not made the clearest in Shout Factory subs, them more or less glossing over the biting part of this and emphasizing the poisoning, even though you see said flowers biting people extensively in this episode.
Still, this continues Zyuranger's streak of showing Mei as a badass, as she is the first to actually recognize this fantasy creature from the fantasy time she originates from, and knows how to defeat it. Or at least lure it into a false sense of security, due to the legends of her tribe.
It's actually one I really like, as it's one of the exceptions which defies my general critiques about this series.
At least until it focuses on the shoehorned-in kid growing a hatred of flowers, as they have all suddenly decided to go and attack people, these attacks being widespread. And I'd buy that if it were not for the fact the boy was present when Dora Guzzler first used this ability to know he was the one behind all of this. Thus, his hatred of flowers is not only out of place, it's attacking something not responsible when he knows what is responsible. Episode 28 begins the next series of story arc episodes, and it begins with Dan working at a ramen shop and doing a horrifically bad job at it.
You know, Kenta in Mega Ranger was an idiot, but when he got a job at a restaurant he frequented because he loved their food, he managed to not do this. Hell, children know not to do this.
As is showcased by the son of his boss being the one to yell at him not to do this. This is that episode I alluded to earlier where it's finally revealed that Barza pays for everyone's expenses, but has so little money due to having to look after all 6 of them, that after food costs he can only give them...
That's about $1 a day for those not used to conversion. $2 after adjusting for inflation to today's money. Yeah, I got more per week for lunch money.
Dan's been allowed to do this part-time work in hopes that it would help him grow the fuck up. It's not been working, but it inspires the rest, since they've done pretty much nothing but goof off when Bandora is not doing something. All of them deciding to get part-time work as well. Something we never see again outside of this episode, as none of this actually proves itself relevant to the plot. Why it was mentioned was to set up how this ramen shop will be screwed over by Bandora, as deep under the store, she and her minions are mining Dokita clay, which she can use to make far stronger monsters than ever before!
It is never seen again after this arc. I'm not kidding.
The first of these monsters, however, is Dora Franken, based off of Frankenstein.
Yes, I know. Frankenstein was the scientist, not the monster. But even in the original book, the monster is referred to as being his son. Not like Japan would know that element of pop culture, nor even care.
But yeah, the latter tipped off to the shenanigans because of him and disguised minions coming in for food in between mining shifts, and the mining process sends up all sorts of toxins which cause subterranean insects to all burst up from under the place, causing numerous health violations. However, it's far too late, and Bandora gets away with the clay, everyone else held up by little Frankie. Until suddenly, all of the Guardian Beasts run wild.
Run away! Run away! Run away!
Geki's trapped inside as Tyranno runs, eventually being deposited in front of Burai, whose teleport from the Lapsus room has also been redirected, so the Guardian Beasts can send them on a quest to acquire a means of countering the Dokita clay monsters Bandora is now forging. And this quest takes them to the domain of King Brachion, a wild guardian beast that has thus far refused to ally with any of the others. And the remaining Zyuranger are held up from trying to help as they find themselves accosted by the new Dokita clay golems and are unable to even harm them. These lot being able, when they are injured, to now split into 2 new golems of equal power in complete rejection of conservation of matter! Screw all the rules, I'm made of magic clay. However, even with Burai backing him up, the pair find themselves no match for Brachion's onslaught and defense of the chest containing the gear they need. The two eventually coming up with the idea to trade weapons. Burai taking the Ryu Gekiken to draw his attention, while Geki takes the dragon armor to climb up to the chest to get it.
Except, wouldn't it make more sense for the one who's going to be the decoy to have the armor? I mean, a sword really isn't going to help against energy blasts from a giant, unless you can cut the energy blasts apart. And that armor would only slow you down with its additional weight.
Regardless, Geki claims the weapons, the Thunderslingers, slingshot-styled secondary weapons that are only ever used a handful of times in the series, despite them being gear that equips onto their sidearms the Ranger guns for the team's third finishing attack.
You know, I bounce back between whether toyetic stuff is a good or bad thing in this genre on a case-by-case basis, but on average, if you're going to have something like that in the series, find some way to use it. Don't just present it as if all it's meant to be is just another toy.
And it's more baffling as the Thunderslingers show themselves as being able to just straight up vaporize these new, uber-powerful Dokita Clay Golems in one shot. It's pretty much the win button they never even think to touch. Oh, and since they're no longer relevant to the plot, I should say the ramen shop owner pretty much has his business literally destroyed from all of this. Him and his son left with nothing but a food cart to live on or with, since their house was destroyed. Our heroes and villains, ladies and gentlemen. However, during this, Bandora has raised a white stone pillar in preparation of her next plan, and when the Zyuranger tried to finish Dora Franken off, it reveals itself to be more than meets the eye.
Stars.
The new zombie Franken thus prevents Zyuranger from trying to strike the pillar as it grows into a giant tower, which is left alone for now. Unfortunately, it's shown that Bandora is throwing all her eggs in one basket again, with her beginning a ritual that will cost her life if she screws it up, but one that will summon her boss, Great Satan, if she manages to succeed.
Or you could, I don't know, work on forging more Dokita Clay monsters since as giants they can't be beaten by the Zyuranger's current arsenal.
Well, whatever. She instead tasks her minions with the kidnapping of assorted children from nearby the pillar, so as to act as sacrifices in the ritual, the Zyuranger discovering this completely by accident, and for once, acting smart by trying to do everything they can to protect the girl that is the last target. Except, take her with them into the cockpits of their mechs, when Zombie Franken is used to lure them all away from her. This is the third time such has been pulled on them, and they keep making the exact same mistake? Well, whatever. Evil wins! And now, incoming message from the big giant head. Where is Spiderman? I want his giant robot or his marriage. And yes, with the ritual completed, Bandora asks her boss to further enhance Zombie Franken, involving him through his Dokita Clay into the invincible Archdemon, Satan Franken, which permits it to once more kick Zyurager's ass. Despite Burai bringing in Dragon Caesar, they prove to be no match to the powers of the devil, which kinda proves to be the nail in the coffin for this team. Acidic foam is sprayed on both of the machines to slowly erode the gods away, the lot being ejected and sent to the lapseless room to meet Clotho, who spills that Burai is slowly approaching his end to the rest of the team, which Burai has endeavored to not say to any of them, this also being where we actually see what killed him. Still, it's brought up as the six of them together need to fulfill an intended purpose, the full revival of the true Zyuranger, Ultimate Zyuranger.
Which, again, when you remember Zyuranger repeatedly tried to get Geki to kill Burai not long before this, really seems as if it was trying to intentionally shoot themselves in the foot, as it's something that would require Burai's presence to even do. God is an asshole.
Then again, all that's needed to bring out Dragon Caesar is the Zyu-Soken, so if Geki killed Burai, he could have just taken his power for himself. But that's only 2 of 3 pieces. The last is Brachion, who they don't yet control, which proves to be part of the quest. They're told to head north in order to reach and tame King Brachion, only for them to be held up by a collection of children who have been affected by the acidic mist Satan Franken has been releasing, which not only distracts them from this task, but because they actually delay progression on it, allows more people to be afflicted by Satan Franken's attacks and depletes even more of Burai's time. Thus, even when they are trying to be serious and on task, The show makes it about the kids.
Plus, their affliction is really nothing they can do anything about. They're hurt by the acid mists burning them, but the way to treat acid burns is flushing them with water or a basic solution like milk or dissolved baking soda, and fresh air. If the acid is still in the air, then what's more, the best way to help them is to deal with the monster, which they're not doing by prioritizing helping the kids. But I got a lot of acid burns when I was still going to college for a chemistry degree.
The kids, by the way, are quickly forgotten after this, so once more, they didn't matter one iota. And worse, this distraction with the kids has allowed the rest of Bandora's minions to catch up with them to further stall them on their quest, leaving only Geki to journey north. He eventually has to commit to a leap of faith, which leads to all of the Zyuranger instantly being teleported together and completing their quest. Makes it easy! They're presented with a slab, telling them to insert their medal and shout their duty.
What duty? Yeah, no. They've never, ever done anything relating to such a thematic in this show for any of them, nor do they ever act before or after this episode in ways that adhere to such a thematic.
Some of this diversion was supposedly in order to make them realize some aspect of their team roles and character, but so little of it rings true. Again, because it's not consistent with how they are presented, and it's not addressed again.
Okay, except for that one. But justice is not a personality characteristic. It is an abstract concept. They keep trying to pull the Hero of Justice card with Geki, appropriate since Yuta would later be Kamen Rider J, but it never really rings true since it's the sole thing they bother to try and define him by.
Folks, they just didn't care.
But whatever, it works, and the six are allowed to combine their mechs into Zutei Daijujin, a form that would be the least used because the combination, and by proxy the toy of it, would prove itself to be far too top-heavy with Dragon Caesar draped over the main mech like a king's mantle to be used with any frequency.
I want to say this one is a typo, as they're saying Kaiser, as in the Germanic word for emperor, which is also synonymous with Zutei's intended meaning as Beast Emperor. The writers do this on occasion simply when they run short on attack name synonyms.
And, of course, this leads to them calling upon King Brachion, and thus finally giving us Kyukoku, aka Ultimate Daijujin, which of course is once again the toys. And admit it, there is something just majestic about this combination, with the Emperor riding his battle chariot into battle. The monster finally dies, Great Satan's vanished, all the kids are saved, except for the one, of course, who is now left homeless because of these actions, and Bandora's left up in her palace to stewed. Still, there's some decent follow-up to this, with Geki haunted by Burai's coming end, which makes him more reckless in battle, as the monster Dora Narcissus begins to devour people and take their life force for itself to facilitate its own growth. Though for some reason Shout Factory says it's solely taking the beauty from them, as opposed to at first targeting beautiful people for this process. While the monster, as it's still taking the form of a plant bulb, is easy to track down and sever the vines it's using to attack people, it does lead to something of a dilemma for Geki, thanks to words from Bandora, and how all this collected life energy can be given to Burai to extend his life beyond the few hours he has left. And Geki admittedly struggles with this devil's temptation.
Though the answer is, of course, obvious. Bandora would never permit them, as enemies, to gain something like this. It's a lie done solely to buy her monsters time to develop, and potentially break the spirit of her enemy's leader.
And it does seem to work, as it takes Goshi to snap him out of it, taking on a guise out of literally nowhere of a Black Knight to attack and challenge him to make him get back his resolve to do the right thing. Too little too late, and the monstrous plant emerges from its bulbous form, revealing...
I'm just a mean green mother from outer space, and I'm bad.
Outer space?
Mother from outer space, and it looks like you've been had.
Unfortunately, Geki seems to have taken the wrong lesson from this, saying you'll both save Geki and defeat Bandora at the same time. I think the implication is he won't stop looking for a solution, but likewise won't allow himself to be swayed by falsehood proclamations of the solution to this problem, but it's not presented as the most clear concept. Next, Dora Lager intends to flood the world with 1,000 days of rain.
Next, you'll tell me you're going to try and set fire to the sun!
Well, it turns out that the gem on her forehead contains a weather spirit of the rain, whose sibling gem is one that contains a weather spirit of the sun. The sun is not a weather phenomena.
It honestly would have made more sense to me to be a sun and moon spirit that when brought together allows one to control the weather, or possibly an ocean or moon spirit. The show's already established the mechs are weak under night conditions. Why not impose that state artificially before beginning the flood the world plot? Hell, that even plays into Japanese mythology with Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, and Susanoo, so they could easily play off that for a fantasy-themed monster.
Unfortunately, most of the Dora monsters are from Western mythology and fantasy, with a few also from similar Chinese lore, none of which bear any real Japanese folklore stylization to them, except, of course, the coming Dora ninja. But fiction has, of course, so bastardized the concept of ninja over the past century that literally anything, even if it absolutely in no way relates to being an actual ninja, can be a ninja. Aside from cosmetic appearances, the definition of ninja has lost all meaning. Anyways, Lager attempts to claim the sun gem from a girl that holds it so as to avoid it being used against her when she attempts to perform her ritual. But this leads to the Zyurangers' involvement, only for them to get trapped in a pocket dimension. A lot of them giving Dan their dino metals to give him the power to break free and counter the monster to release everyone else, which of course fails. The Aesop trying to be taught in this episode is how to have courage, and directed at the girl with the sun gem. But the problem is, they don't actually teach courage, but recklessness, as she blindly charges the monster and slams the gems together to break both of them. Courage is to act in the face of your fears and insecurities. Recklessness is to ignore fears, thoughts, and consequences, and is usually an excuse to act foolishly. Bad Dan! Bad! With Burai down to 13 hours, he starts to become restless and, with death coming anyways, he decides to take some time and appreciate the real world for a bit, only to see a baby carriage be pulled suddenly by Bandora's powers from the occupant's sister, forcing Burai to chase after it, only for its occupant to be a golem.
Wow, I say children are evil, but even I don't mean it as that literal.
I'll give it this. For a chase the baby carriage sequence, it's far better shot than that nonsensical one from Season 2 of Power Rangers. Of course, this is all Bandora using the things around them to drain more of Burai's time, as right now, getting rid of him is her only hope of defeating the Zyuranger. Plus, she gets to torture a baby in the meantime, even if she fails.
Ah, the tears of the fandom purists and their petty, ignorant squabbles.
The older sister of the pair ends up drawn into all of this as well to save the baby, only to get drawn into the Sleeping Beauty myth, which Burai also has to save her from.
Seriously, dude, you are over 170 million years old!
But while they succeed in saving the kids, Burai has lost 8 hours due to the day's events, leaving only 5 remaining. Next is...
Oh, fuck. If that rant from a moment ago didn't tip you off, I don't like ninja!
But in spite of that, I don't think this is a bad episode. Hell, it's actually pretty good as the cast actually do appropriate ninja stuff and actually act in a ninja-esque fashion. Which is fine until the Zyuranger do it, and you once again remember that these guys are from 170 million years before the concept of ninja would have been around. So then performing ninja acts is exceedingly out of place.
Actually, there is an applicable real-world explanation for this one. Takumi Hashimoto was the tag-along kid in Sekai Ninja Jiraiya. Yeah, that show. Its main writer was Susumu Takaku, who in turn wrote this episode, which spotlighted Boy helping out in ninja school to facilitate such surreal scenes. So, in reality, it's more of a comedic meta-reference.
But hey, they're helping the ninja school defend their Grandmaster's research into extending people's lives from Dora Ninja, and the assistance from the kid guest actor this time is appropriate as they are skilled and trained in combat and subterfuge, which validates their inclusion. Everyone all around coming off smart, as that really is the only way you should be shown beating a proper ninja, by outwitting them. They are not proper ninja! Still, the ninja tricks they use to force out Dora Ninja and defeat him are a series of stunts that should make Jiraiya proud, to the point I don't even want to really spoil them. Then a fishing boy ends up finding a cliché, as you would expect, a sealed bottle containing evil spirits be gone! Yeah, it's actually a treasure map. Of evil! And the kid recognizes an assortment of the landmarks. The problem with this is, all of the landmarks are from the modern day, when this map was made and sent out into the sea by a pirate in ancient times, before the various modern landmarks would have even been constructed.
Now, I mentioned before, this show has problems with keeping its setting straight.
The map, as both sides reveal, will lead to a mirror which will destroy anything that is reflected in it. When the Zyuranger try to take it from him so as to keep everyone safe, they fail, because the brat is very, very greedy, hoping the map will lead to a treasure he can use to cover his and his mom's expenses. Even bankroll a trip to Europe. Unfortunately, neither side reveals what the map actually leads to so as to subvert that, thus the mirror does end up being recovered and used against both sides. The boy frightened by its power, which allows Lammy to retrieve it, but eventually loses it to save Reforzer when he's placed in front of it. Honestly, this is another decent filler episode, once more justifying the inclusion of the kid, and the race to prevent the mirror's recovery justifies the frantic pace of it. Well, once again the dinosaur eggs are found washing ashore, a brat taking them from the two kids who found them just before the Zyuranger once again inexplicably show on the scene to try and claim them. So once again it's a free-for-all for possession of the eggs, Bandora this time calling upon Dora Kinkaku, which Goshi identifies as a creature based off an entity of the same name from the classic literary work Journey to the West. Forgetting, once again, that Goshi is from a time long before that book was written, and the show has not established that he or the others became acclimated to such works in this time period, nor recognizing Bandora would not have known of this either at all. The kids, Eggs, and Mei end up sealed in Kikaku's sake jug, while the others are sent to the toy store? Yeah, this is that aforementioned using the toys in place of the prop suits for conferences with the Guardian Beasts thing. And this honestly is the most commercial-like scene of them all.
Seriously, they're all staged like a bunch of throwaway kid actors are about to come into play with the mecha. I swear, this was a Transformers commercial for the Scramble City toy line.
And it's a superfluous time-wasting scene too, with Eugene reiterating what he is, before telling the lot of them that the dinosaur eggs are important and are nearing the point that they will hatch. Which is all things they already know.
You see, they just didn't care.
They engage Dora Kinkaku, Burai coming to help, and with Go Ryuji's assistance, they pierce the gourd to free Mei, the eggs, and the kids, and thus winning the day with Ultimate Eugene. The gods, since the Zyuranger have repeatedly failed to keep these eggs safe, decide to take them and store them inside King Brachion, so they will stay safe until they hatch in 2 months.
Though in hindsight, might have been a bad idea. This time they could have probably taken them and stored them at their base, as it's not like Bandora can get them in there.
Wait, right, I forgot about that.
Still, overall, these are a lot better stretched episodes than the first 16. Though again, with the periodic hiccup and they forget things they established or made plot points, which evokes lots of contradictions. We'll wrap up everything left in the final coming review, along with my additional thoughts on the series.